Why do you think so many people are struggling financially? Because they're trapped in thinking patterns that prevent them from making money. Entrepreneurs see opportunities as rewards, but they see them as risks. The wealthy see tools, but they see hurdles. In other words, success is all about your mindset. In this video, I share 7 important ideas I learned from Robert Kiyosaki that will change the way you think. You'll discover how applying them can help you meet your financial goals. How do you transform small amounts of money into large amounts? With leverage, or doing more with less? This concept refers to a lever, a tool that uses a beam and pivot to harness the laws of physics, moving heavy objects with minimal force. Leverage isn't just about heavy lifting, though. It's one of the principles governing the world. Let's take a look at the animal kingdom, for example. Humans aren't nearly as fast as cheetahs or as strong as bears. Unlike birds and fish, we can't fly or survive underwater. And yet we dominate the earth. That's leverage. These animals use the advantages nature has given them, but they don't multiply them like humans do. We leverage our mind to do things our bodies can't. The history of innovation is a series of technological leaps that have given our species greater leverage over the natural world. And this leverage has shaped human society. About 5,000 years ago, clever sea merchants discovered that using large woven flax sheets on a pole and crossbeam could harness the wind, propelling their boats. This made sailing easier, more efficient, and more powerful than relying on oarsmen. With this innovation, vessels could carry more cargo over longer distances. Merchants and statesmen who adopted this technology prospered and built powerful empires. Entrepreneurs who understood how to harness the internet early on are among the richest people to have ever lived. Always keep that in mind. Leverage is power. How you see the world shapes how you act in the world. In other words, reality is partly constructed within your own mind. Think of a concept like risk. The perceived risk of a certain behavior often determines whether you engage in that behavior or not. Investing, for example, is often seen as risky, so some people don't invest. After all, the best way to avoid getting burned is to avoid playing with fire, right? But how often are you affected by that perceived risk? Fixating on the risk would probably paralyze you with fear, and walking around a city streets would become impossible. Fixating on risk alone is counterproductive. That's why Robert finds the risk-reward ratio much more productive. 9 out of 10 businesses fail, and yet people continue to open new businesses. Each entrepreneur simply has a different perspective and appetite for risk. And relying on the risk-reward ratio helps them understand what risk they're willing to take. We all know that failure is possible in any endeavor we undertake. But it's also important to look at the overall balance of failures against successes. If every new business fails 9 out of 10 times, but the reward of a successful 10th attempt is great enough, we can afford to fail on the previous 9 attempts. The lesson here is, the risk-reward ratio helps you put risk into perspective. Concepts are the tools of the brain. When you use them correctly, they can help you see things your eyes can't. Understanding how you're using positive debt, available assets, and income to support your goal to become rich is the first step toward a successful retirement. To keep track of the positive debt versus available assets being used as currency, you should look at the debt-to-equity ratio. Say you have $100,000 in positive debts and $20,000 in equities. Divide the former number by the latter, and you get a debt-to-equity ratio of 5. That figure doesn't tell you much right away, but it's a handy yardstick to measure your financial health over time. If your ratio goes up to 10, for example, you'll know there's a problem. Your debt might have doubled while your equity remained constant. Or perhaps your debt remained the same while your equity was halved. In either case, this jump is an alarm bell telling you to reassess your finances and steer them back on track. A movement in the other direction, by contrast, is an indicator of progress. Then there's the wealth ratio, which helps you measure your passive and portfolio income against your expenses. Divide your indirect income by your total expenses. Say you receive $800 from stocks or rental income each month, and your monthly expenses add up to $4,000. This gives you a wealth ratio of 0.2, meaning your income from sources other than your job cover 20% of your expenses. This indicator tells you how close you are to being able to make bold financial moves like retiring early or taking on a more rewarding job that pays less. When your ratio gets to 1, that means you'll break even. Any number over 1 means you'll be making money. Your debt and wealth ratios can help you track your financial health over time. Dozens of books about how to get rich are published every year, but it's often hard to say which authors get it right and which don't. A lot of times, readers are told to take steps that are difficult to put into practice, and so they never get around to testing these ideas. Robert has a more viable approach. Rather than starting with complex models and strategies, concentrate on low-hanging fruit by adopting simple and good habits. If some habits make you rich and others make you poor, it stands to reason that you should cultivate the former and avoid the latter. Let's take a look at 2 of the habits Kiyosaki credits with transforming his fortunes. First up is learning, which is one of the most crucial habits you'll ever pick up. We live in a dynamic and fluid information age. This differs from the 20th century, which was an industrial age. It used to be that most people learned a set number of skills and then spent their working lives applying this know-how. Today, by contrast, we need to keep learning. Change is constant and inevitable. What worked yesterday won't necessarily work tomorrow. Put differently, what really matters is staying one step ahead of the pack and seeing what others can't. Acquiring new knowledge and ideas is one way of investing in yourself. It also helps you spot opportunities before others do. With all of these opportunities on the horizon, you'll probably need to borrow money, which leads us to the second habit: rely on a good bookkeeper. Most people don't qualify for loans because they have poor financial records. Ultimately, few people will trust you to manage their money if you can't prove that you're able to manage your own. A bookkeeper's job is to create professional records showing that you're keeping your finances in order. This helps increase your financial leverage, giving you access to new resources like positive debt. So, simple and good habits go a long way. Debt is a form of leverage. This claim might sound counterintuitive. After all, most people spend a great deal of time and energy trying to get out of debt. But used in the right way, debt is a useful tool that can make you richer. It all depends on whether you're getting into good or bad debt. So, what's the difference? In a nutshell, good debt generates income, while bad debt eats away at existing income. In the first case, debt is working for you. In the second, you're working for it. Many people borrow money to acquire liabilities, things that cost them more money. They use credit cards to finance expensive holidays and take out loans to buy cars. Servicing this debt takes a hefty chunk out of their paychecks. But debt can also be used to buy assets, things that create an income. One of the best assets to buy with debt is real estate. This could either be property you're planning to resell or a place you can rent out. Let's look at the first real estate deal that Kiyosaki funded with debt to see how it works. In 1974, Kiyosaki found a small beachfront condo in Hawaii, which was being sold for $18,000. Back then he was broke, so he borrowed the cash. His bank gave him a $16,000 loan, and he used a credit card to cover the $2,000 down payment. After acquiring the property, he rented it out. The amount didn't just cover Kiyosaki's loan and credit card repayments, though. It also generated a monthly income of $25. Now, that isn't exactly a king's ransom, but the principle is important. Remember, Kiyosaki hadn't spent a dime of his own money, yet he was still generating an income after covering all his expenses. In finance, this is called an infinite return. We might as well just call it free money. The lesson here is simple. If you borrow in the right way, you can use other people's money to make yourself richer. In practice, this typically involves investing in real estate that generates income, which we'll look at next. How do you find a great deal for a real estate investment? It's simple. Train yourself to spot what others miss. Don't worry, that's not as daunting as it might sound. Real estate isn't all that different from other things you buy. Just like finding the best possible deal on a holiday, you have to look around and compare offers before taking the plunge. So if you want to understand the real estate market, you have to view a lot of properties. Robert recommends the 110-3-1 method to assess any potential investments. That means looking at 100 properties, making an offer on 10 of them, having 3 sellers agree to your offer, and finally buying one of them. Take it from one of Kiyosaki's friends, a lawyer who decided to invest in real estate without using the method. She bought a beachfront condo near San Diego after looking at only 2 units, both of which were in the same complex. 2 years later, she was losing over $450 a month. The Homeowners Association had raised its maintenance fees, and it turned out she couldn't charge as much rent as she had originally hoped. Even worse, selling wasn't an option since she bought the condo for $25,000 more than anyone was willing to offer. She would have been able to avoid all of this if she had simply taken the time to research the local market. The moral of this story is, you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find a handsome prince. A lot of people don't spend enough time comparing potential investments. Instead, they act on impulse or hearsay. If you want to find the right property, you have to look at a lot of duds. Every fisherman has a story about the one that got away. On the other hand, real estate investors have a story about nabbing the perfect property that everyone else overlooked. Robert Kiyosaki and his wife Kim are no different. For them, it was a small mountain cabin they found while on vacation in Pennsylvania. This property they found didn't just end up being a cash cow. It also taught them an invaluable lesson about investing in real estate. Just because a property has problems doesn't mean you can't turn those problems into money. When they were on a hiking trip in Pennsylvania, the Kiyosakis stumbled upon a rundown cabin with 15 acres, priced unusually low at $43,000. Why was the cabin so cheap? The property's well didn't produce enough water to sustain full-time occupants. After poking around, they consulted a well expert. It turned out that the well did provide enough water. The actual issue was that the amount of water it produced depended on the time of year. There was an easy fix for that: installing 3,000-gallon holding tanks to store surplus water for leaner months. The couple offered $24,000. The owner, who had been trying to sell the cabin for years, accepted. After closing the deal, Kiyosaki returned to the property with the well expert. The 2 holding tanks ended up costing him a mere $5,000. A month after the installation, the Kiyosakis put the cabin up for sale. It was snapped up within weeks by a young couple who were delighted to find their dream home in the mountains. Final price? $66,000. That's a $37,000 profit. It's a lesson the Kiyosakis have never forgotten. With a little patience and creative thinking, problems can be opportunities.